join us, those both within and outside of our district. Superintendent, I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Wells, for the beginning of the presentation, and board, as we go through, we'll let them to walk through the items they have, and then we'll answer and look for any questions and answers at that time.
Very excited to have this conversation about a brand new high school. So Clyde has been working, and he has a PowerPoint ready for us, and I believe that they're bringing copies for us.
Yes. Thank you. Tonight we're going to have a presentation from Schenkel Schultz on the Osceola prototype that has currently been used at Celebration High School, Harmony High School, and Liberty High School, as well as several other places around the state. And they're going to highlight how the design has continued to evolve and how it really implements the 21st century learning environment. I know that's a key element of what we're looking for, including STEM and some cutting-edge CTE programs. First off, I'd like to introduce Schenkel Schultz representatives. I'd like to introduce Tom Chandler.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Yeah, this seems a little too formal, so I'll ask my team to join me up here. But first of all, Chandler, I am the president of Schenkel Schultz, and let me just say it's gratifying to be here again, and certainly exciting to talk about in high school. We've had a lot of history here, and I think that what we'd like to talk with you about today, I think rightfully so, the board is looking at this prototype high school that Clyde has talked about, that we've done 3 for you, and last being built in 2008, and I think you're making the right decision to question, I think at least, is this current, is this up to date, and does it have the capabilities and maybe the flexibility to deal with changes in educational trends, and most specifically, can it adapt to the technology and to the teaching modalities of 21st century education learning. And so I think what we hope to talk with you about today and really get into is just some of the flexibility, some of the history, and more importantly, what we have learned and done in the last 7 or 8 years that I think we can bring to bear on this particular prototype. So I'm joined today by 3 of my partners, David Torbert, Michelle Chandler, and Joe Toth. And like I said, there's a lot of history here with this team. So I'm,
Joe,
quite frankly,
chair up.
Yes.
Just pull a chair.
Get up here, Joe.
And I'm going to bring John Davis up and let John sit in my place and kind of turn it over to John and
Just have the 4?
everybody.
Here, you can have this one.
Do we have more than 4?
That's right, yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay. So I am going to turn this over to Michelle and David and Joe and let them walk you through this. Do we need to kill some lights, or is that?
No, it'll brighten up just
Okay.
the bulbs.
Gotta warm up.
Warm it up. Okay. So before we get started, I want to at least set the stage and say this is designed to be a collaborative discussion. So when things come up on the screen, if you want to talk or you want to ask questions, please do so. This is not meant to be a formal presentation, but rather kind of something that will start the conversation rolling. And I want to make sure we cover all of the kind of thoughts and concerns and questions and comments that you all have. So feel free to jump in when necessary.
And I appreciate
Whoa,
that.
whoa, whoa.
Thank you.
After she begins.
After a period, hits the end of the sentence.
Here's the question I've got. We've got Mr. Butler here, Mr. Studley here, they basically had this campus built, and so the question I would have for both of them is, if you had it to do over on your campuses with the buildings you've got, the layout, what would you, if you were starting over with them, what would you do different?
Well, there's a couple of different things that I have thought about since Mr. Wells had invited me to the meeting, and I made a list of things, but I
You
don't.
want to watch your PowerPoint first?
Yeah, say, why don't
That
we,
would- yes.
maybe
Okay.
maybe Michelle can kind of walk through some of the ideas and modifications, and maybe that'll hit.
Absolutely, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's, that's
I would like to say something though before you. This first slide really, I think, sets the tone for where you're going. And I haven't seen the PowerPoint at all. And the reason for that is if you look at the desks and the chairs that these students would have, they would actually be able to find the teacher anywhere. As a teacher moves around the classroom, the child rotates in those chairs. and can actually sit in pairs, in threes or in fours. So if that's the direction in which we're going, that's a great start.
You've got it. I think that everything you said just typifies what you're going to see in these slides, so go ahead, Michelle.
All right, so we're gonna get started by stepping backwards for a second and just looking at what we've done over the years. And the fact of the matter is that we have designed 39 high school campuses from this prototype. Many of them in Central Florida, as you see. But we've done a lot of work since we completed Liberty High School back in 2007, and you'll see 12 versions of that prototype since that time. Yep, go ahead, sorry.
This isn't a long question. What is the average size, student station-wise, of these high schools?
They range in size on the small side to about 2,200 students, and on the high side to just over 3,000. So,
Okay.
and several points in between.
Where's the 3,000 one, Dave?
All the ones that you see in Orange County are just shy of 3,000. They're right at 2,900
So Oak Ridge?
students. Oak Ridge was actually a replacement of an existing campus. That one was designed for 2,200. That's on the lower
Evans
side.
University.
Yeah.
And
East River Lakes.
the Liberty was built for
25.
25. Yes.
Yep.
And there's space for one additional building.
Yes. That would make the 25.
No,
No.
that would
add on to
increase
the
to
25.
Yeah.
So was the cafeteria built for the additional 25 plus?
It was sized in between. What was physically built was really aimed at the 2,500 students, but there was the intention at the time anyways that if it got bigger, that cafeteria could expand either through outdoor dining or even expanding the building if necessary. But it was designed for the number of students that was there, the cafeteria was originally. So, one of the reasons that we've been so successful using that prototype and all those times that Michelle mentioned over the years is because prototypes have some benefits that come along with them. They aren't just static designs. In our experience, I think I heard Joe say earlier, I don't think we've ever done a prototype reuse that's been exactly the same as the last one. There's always something that changes. That includes reconfiguring the buildings to address any specific site issues or layouts that need to happen, changing the exterior look so that you can have a very unique identity for each school that you develop. And then last but certainly not least, incorporating refinements and updates and changes to the program and curriculum that goes and programs that go into the school are all key factors that go into it. In fact, that kind of matches the history that we have of having done this for you on the 3 schools that were mentioned earlier. You can see all 3 of them have very distinctive different looks to them. They were all site adapted on sites, and layouts were modified to adapt to that. And you can see down at the bottom of the slide, each one of them has very unique and specific programs that were implemented in it versus the other designs. So it's something that we've done with you before in the past. In terms of creating that unique identity, you've got some examples here of some of the different kinds of looks that can be established on this prototype. That's not to say that these are the only ones. These are just representative of there's a full spectrum of what you can accommodate, whether it's being certainly cost effective and mindful of the cost, creating a modern civic image or iconic presence with an entry tower, high-tech designs, or even collaboration with the community to create a community-centered design. All of those are possibilities that this prototype is flexible and can accommodate. And we also are aware from having heard the conversation about this before is that there's some desire to blend in with the Lake Nona context that's in that immediate vicinity around that campus. And so we've got the image there of the Valencia Community College building that's at Lake Nona, which we were the design architects for as well. So we certainly, that's another option that's a possibility, could be blended into the design of things. It's the one on the right, and it's also this image right here on the.
Got it.
You've driven by that.
So
Oh, a little pointer.
A little light.
So some of the advantage, some of the big picture advantages of using prototypes is number one, they save you time. The design time is significantly reduced because you've got to start already with the basics. It reduces the amount of cost the district is going to experience. Probably one of the most important things is building off of a prototype that you've already used or you've already designed is that you get to keep and hold on to your institutional knowledge as a district about the things that worked things that didn't work, the things you want to change, the programs you want to implement, those kinds of things. But you get to take advantage of that institutional knowledge and lessons that you've learned from the past, instead of starting all over with a blank page.
Do you also receive input from the other folks in the other counties of what does?
That's a great question.
We do. We do receive a lot of input, both end-user feedback, construction feedback to streamline that part of the process. So yes, there's a database, if you will, that we collect on all of this that we keep, and so you get to take advantage of all that.
And that's
institutional
integrated
knowledge.
into the new prototype, or that's just information you can share with our team here?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
And then another advantage is because it's been used so many times, is that as a cost model, you get a very predictable and reliable result when you start with something that's got this known quantity. So that's, it gives you some comfort in terms of planning and going forward with it. And last but certainly not least, as we're going to kind of illuminate through the rest of the presentation, you absolutely have the opportunities to incorporate 21st century educational aspects into the design. It's got that flexibility. Yes, sir.
Because you stressed, the cost savings a few times, and you've built this school several times. So the question I've got is out of all of the schools you've built with this over the last, say, 5-6 years, which construction company builds it for the least per square foot?
Oh gosh, that's a very tough question because each of them have been built in a market that has changed each and every time. So.
You dodge that
It's okay.
nicely.
Have you-
Well, they have. I mean, Oak Ridge
Were any
was,
of them design build versus
we have done a couple of them in a little further back than 10 years in the design build arrangement. Atlantic Coast and Jacksonville was done as a design build. Westport Middle School, High School was done as a
Or
design
wasn't this
build.
part of this prototype?
Yeah.
No,
the Atlantic Coast
was this based on this design? Yeah. We've teamed with all of them,
Oh, yeah.
and they're all very capable.
That was my question.
Okay.
Dave, you answered that very well.
Good.
So we were all here 2 weeks ago for the board workshop, and there were a number of things that we heard that were really important to each and every one of you that we need to incorporate into the design of a new high school. And I think it's worth slowly kind of recapping them to make sure that we're on the right page. First and foremost, it was very clear that you are passionate about 21st century learning environments and incorporating those concepts into the design of this new high school. That also translates to a media center. This library needs to be much more of a Starbucks, Barnes & Noble type of environment rather than the traditional model. We are right down the street from Lake Nona, the medical city, so the programs that are included within this high school need to accommodate some of the synergy that's happening in that area, in that community. STEM programs, technology everywhere, the idea of large adaptive spaces to accommodate testing when that occurs. These are all concepts we need to accommodate in this high school. You want the ability to grow in the future. Perhaps larger dining spaces, a gymnasium, shared facilities is an option that you've explored a little bit, and the idea of voluntary pre-K on site. So we need to consider all of these things when we are moving forward.
I just want to say personally, I know we had that discussion, but after having some discussions after that meeting with some folks on our staff and some other folks that have been in education, I don't like the 5,000 and 4,000 seat high school idea.
No, 5,000, 3,000.
I mean, I would even say 3,000 would be maybe the maximum.
Well, it's good because we have some slides further to talk about all
Yeah.
this in more
But
detail.
my concern is, I really believe this is it's competing with that school right there. And when you get so big that you start limiting students' ability to participate, there's only so many people on a team and so many people in a club and everything else. I think it can become a negative.
You're right, I mean, but the reality is, once you build it, I mean, you can build it for whatever size we want, people are still gonna move in.
Yeah.
And then we gotta find a place to put them. And so I'd rather on the front end, I mean, ultimately, Clarence, Ricky, and all you guys, in a perfect world, all our high schools are 1,500 student seat high schools. That's really what I think is best. I'm not an educational expert, but the economics and the demographics just don't lend us to do that.
But when it comes to administration, when you become that
Yeah.
big, it really does impact administration and students, because now you have a principal who's really an assistant principal of the 9th grade, and there's a lot of collaboration that has to happen there as well. It just becomes enormous body of students.
It's an adolescent city.
Let me just
Yeah.
throw this out to your point. I never thought 5,000 would be the direction to go. I thought 4,000 was too big. 3,000 is a number that I think is something that we need to consider. But also, we need to think about this school being different from other schools. This could become schools within a school, meaning, each one of these, as you saw the layout of the different campuses, and each one of these, the Thunder Hall and the Lightning Hall and all that could become, in this example, a school for business, school for science, whatever that is. And so we can completely change the way that we're approaching how we deliver education at a high school with a campus like this, which may lend to a little bit of a larger campus with a different administrative structure as well.
But to your point, though, also, Tim, I think we're all, and again, we want to hear from curriculum people also. I think that if we're going to build a school that size, just so we want everyone to be successful there. I think you got to have a 9th grade center as part of that. I think that's integral so that we can get those kids to on a successful path without getting lost.
I think you did a very nice job of listening at the last meeting.
Yes. Didn't we talk about the 9th grade center would limit our space for a future middle school site, Mr. Davis?
It would, we could either put a 9th grade campus on there or probably a middle school.
So it's either or,
But we
basically.
could, as we're developing the site, we could keep all of it in mind and see if we could accommodate it all. But there would be a possible compromise there.
What's the advantage of a 9th grade center?
And maybe I should let the academic people answer it, but it takes the transition from middle school to high school is pretty traumatic. And if you cushion that with a 9th grade where they're all in there except for they can take advanced courses and then they can still participate in the non-academic. But it isolates them at first and provides sort of a halfway house before they get into
Halfway
the
house.
mainstream.
Transitional space.
That doesn't sound much better. Let's transition out.
Wait. Here's the euphemism: cushion, halfway house, transition. How about this? Do we have these 9th grade centers in all our high schools?
We don't.
All right.
We don't
So
have a high
there's
school that big, though.
okay, but do we have so
Gateway has one.
Gateway has one. I
used to have
know.
one at Osceola.
Yeah.
But we don't have one at Osceola, right? How's that been working out there?
Fine.
Do
You
they
can
need
talk
cushion there?
to the principals. Buddy doesn't have.
We do not.
All right,
We
so-
try to keep our 9th grade students in a particular area depending on their academic needs, but, so we're able to meet their needs in that way, but we don't have a separate administrative facility or different things. The students still interact with the general population. In a school our size, it seems to work, but I could also see the advantage of the 9th grade center.
And celebration last
Another
year.
one of my favorite terms: general population. Okay, so the irony is not lost upon me. But here's the thing. I mean, in the design, bringing it back to why it's relevant. Is that really a consideration that we need to think about whether we design so that we could have that from the get-go at 9th?
Well, if it's a desire for us to look into, we can look into the feasibility of it with the academic side to see
Yeah.
if it works in this situation or not. It's definitely something we can look into.
But now I'll go to Melba here. Now it's your turn. In terms of 21st century learning, how does that fit in? How does that fit into that paradigm?
I believe that all the children should be together.
That's what I thought.
As we're looking at the academics and if we're looking at STEM, and we're looking at anything that has to do with industry, you have to start with children right from the very beginning, whether it's developing their skills on teamwork, the vocabulary that has to be rendered, working with students who are in other grade levels, because that will happen with either DE courses, AP courses, etc. So for me, I would prefer to see them all together. Michael, were you back there?
Yes, Ms. John, I completely agree. Considering the focus this high school's going to have, they need to interact.
They need to.
And board for the folks.
Set up accelerated, ready to go.
For the board members that brought up the need of a 9th, what my limited research has shown us, we move towards the 21st century collaborative learning. That's a paradigm. That's something that goes, with the whole, probably will be integral to the actual mission, strategic goals that we have as a district, and how we're moving with this. and I just didn't see too much of, it never came up about having a ninth grade center or anything like that. It actually looks more towards integration. So anyway, I just wanted to address what my research came from.
They didn't bring it up.
I didn't bring it up.
Somebody brought it up.
Jay.
Okay, you're all wrong.
Oh, if it was Jay, I'd take it all back.
All right, so let's start with the first idea on the list, which is creating a 21st century high school. So one of the most important things that you can do to create a successful 21st century school is work with someone who has done this before, who can bring lessons learned to the table. I think it's at least worth pointing out that we have designed 29 examples of 21st century schools. Most of these schools are in Florida, and I would say about half of them are at the high school level. So there are a variety of lessons learned that we can bring to the table.
What's a teal lab?
Great question.
You can find out.
Technology-enabled active learning.
We'll show you more.
We'll show you. We'll
Could
show
have
you
more regarding that.
Okay, so just to kind of recap, so this is the way that students have learned in the past, and it's a lot about lecturing. So someone like me stands in front of you, and everybody's sitting in rows, and I talk, and unless you're an auditory learner, you're not necessarily retaining that much information. Today's schools are different. It's about accommodating all these learning modalities. So you're still doing lecture, but you're doing a variety of other activities. Students are collaborating with one another, they're demonstrating, they're working together in groups. So the point is, as architects, we need to be able to design a facility that's flexible to accommodate all of these learning modalities. So classroom buildings of the past. You have this box, essentially, and a series of classrooms that all operate off of this double-loaded corridor. You can see everything is like very compartmentalized. There's not a lot of interaction between these spaces. Everything operates independently. So today, within that same framework of a rectangle, you have a variety of different activities that are happening. You have a bunch of different classrooms of various sizes. Within that circulation zone, it's a little bit wider. Now you have flexible furniture in that space so that small groups can come outside of the classroom and start to work together. You can do one-on-one tutoring in that space. You have this larger open space where you can have perhaps two different classes coming together, and suddenly you've got your English class and your history class working together on an integrated project, integrated curriculum. So again, all of these activities are happening within that one space.
So what do those spaces look like when you get in them? So we've got a series of slides here that show some imagery of what goes on. I'll start in the upper left-hand corner there. You know, a lot of times there'll be some incorporation of operable walls. There's the walls that open and close. And they do that so that the spaces can be reconfigured, rearranged, combined, separated as needed to support all or any of those activities that Michelle was talking about earlier. You'll notice that, you know, all the spaces are designed to be very dynamic. Furniture is an integral part of that. Technology is integrated, and we'll talk more about all those. But you know, you see the touch screen. It's just a very dynamic, very flexible space, and just about every aspect that you can.
Do the flexible walls work from a soundproofing perspective?
We're going to touch on that, but yes, they do. I mean, that's one of the lessons learned that we've gone through. A lot of writable wall surfaces. You know, that could be the touchscreen technology hanging on the wall. It could be idea paint that allows the students to collaborate as they're sitting there on the wall, or even on the glass panels that may.
So I wouldn't have got in trouble in third grade.
Yeah, right.
You still
Just
find a way
these kinds of environments also typically have a high degree of visibility throughout, which is not only a safety and security thing, but it creates a visual connectedness to all the activities that are going on, and also, importantly, allows daylight to get into the educational environment from the outside as well. So that's a very important aspect of these kinds of spaces.
Are there window coverings, are there window shades on those walls?
There are
So,
in many cases, so you can control the light when you need to for presentations or those kinds of
It
things.
just sounds just telling.
Right. Furniture. You touched on the furniture. Furniture is a key ingredient in 21st century learning because the spaces and the building needs to be flexible, but the furniture also has to be flexible so that the students can break into smaller groups, maybe pairs or teams of 4, or come back together as a large group and be able to move and adapt that furniture and those arrangements to support all those activities. So that's a key ingredient. And then yes, sound is a very important ingredient. while you want to have a lot of visibility in those operable partitions, you want to be able to see what's going on next door, but you don't necessarily want to hear it. So we've learned through experience, sometimes the hard way, that you've got to have the right STC, sound transmission coefficient ratings on those partitions to make sure that you get that acoustical privacy when you need it.
So the Media Center is another space that has been pretty significantly transformed in the last 10, 15 years. This is actually Celebration High School, and back then it was about a lot about the books. Those were really the centerpiece of the environment, a lot of stationary furniture that wasn't moved around, and it was all about being quiet in the spaces. So today's Media Center is very different. Technology really is the centerpiece of that environment. It's a lot more about collaboration. You can see students working together in groups, sharing ideas, learning in a more hands-on environment.
Did you say that is the media center smaller than for?
They have been trending towards the smaller size because of the advent of technology,
Right.
reduction in the number of hard copy books. I mean, this is actually an example of a 21st century media center that we've designed at Kaiserslautern High School for the Department of Defense education activity.
Where is it geographically?
This one's at Ramstein, Germany. Yeah. You can see that it just has a different look and arrangement to it than the traditional quiet library space. You can see there's still books, but it's really integrating that technology and different furniture and zones within it that allow a lot of different activities. So, and this one actually,
Is that like a little conference room? Is that kind of what?
it's a group teaming space. And you can see, the integration of the technology with like the Mediascape tables located here where students can come together and collaborate as a team and integrate the technology into that collaboration. You've got zones where you can have individual workstations or benching stations here along the left, soft seating areas where there could be more casual collaboration in those kinds of activities. And the idea is really to provide a variety of different opportunities that, again, support all of those activities that need to happen, even the ones that we don't know about today. Have the flexibility to accommodate those. So, if there's one thing that we've learned in all of the 21st century design experience that we've had is that the approach to 21st century is not a one-size-fits-all, okay? And there's really a spectrum of how you can do this. And I think the key is going to be collaborating with you, collaborating with your staff, and finding what that right, specific, unique Osceola County School District answer is. But to that end, we brought some examples to kind of show you some points along that spectrum of ways that you could think about doing this. The first one is what I would say is sort of a gentle step into the 21st century. And so this is would be your typical academic neighborhood or wing. And in this case, you could simply take two of the traditional educational spaces out and incorporate a more 21st century flexible learning environment like you see here. Again, incorporating the flexible nature of the furniture and the organization. It could include an operable wall, so the spaces could be used as two individual spaces or opened up and used for larger activities or for testing or for those kinds of purposes. And you could strategically select locations throughout the academic neighborhood wings to incorporate, maybe more than one of these within the campus or as many of these as you'd like. So that's could be one step. That's sort of at the initial step, if you will.
Primary.
A primary step, yes.
Putting your toe in the water.
Yeah, it's putting your toe in the water. Some other examples that we brought, this is actually the middle school, high school academic wing, or actually the high school, one of the high school wings at P.K. Young Research and Development School in Gainesville that we designed. You can see this is a much different organization. Again, you've got this collaborative, we like to call them learning hubs, which is a collaborative space that, again, has that flexibility in the furniture and the arrangement of everything. It allows for all kinds of activities, be they one-on-one activities, small group, large group, all of those kinds of collaborative project-based types of encounters to happen, as well as the spaces that you saw organized around the perimeter that are a variety of different classrooms that can have different uses. This one actually, in that case, is a distance learning lab. I don't know if you saw earlier in the video, there was a STEM lab incorporated at the end of that. So you can have those specialized spaces, but connected by this intermediate space that allows for those collaborative, project-based types of interactions to happen. So this would kind of be at the other end of the spectrum of reorganizing the academic wings almost entirely to be something more like this. And then one more example of academic. This is again from some of the DIA work that we've done. This one's at Kaiserslautern High School, also in Germany. But again, the academic neighborhood organized around this learning hub.
How many STEAM stations that school have?
In that school, that one's designed for 1,600 students. But also the idea of incorporating the outside into the academics. So, because one of the key things about 21st century education is that learning happens everywhere. Not just in the building or in the academic spaces, but also outside. So again, just trying to create a very flexible, adaptable environment that provides opportunities for all kinds of education to happen, both what you know today and what's coming tomorrow.
And so Jay, you were just asking about the technology-enabled active learning lab. So this is a video of that lab space.
Audio enhancement technologies, as well as smart and iPad technologies. The new labs serve as the premier interactive learning environment for students to tackle tasks using research internet-based information. The students brainstorm, debate, and respond to the given assignments while developing leadership, team building, and real-life skills.
There's the writing on the glass. You wouldn't get in trouble for it.
Yeah, thank you. That's
So-
Bishop Moore High School?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it is, in Orange County. But again, the idea of all of this is just to create a much more flexible environment that allows for a variety of different learning opportunities to happen, whatever those may be. And so we want to take it a step further and talk about some of the other examples of experience that we have in our portfolio. As I think Dave mentioned it earlier, we did design the Lake Nona campus for Valencia College down the street from the site. And there's a number of lessons learned that you could apply to the design of this new high school. Their media center, for example, is actually split into 2 levels. And so on the left, you'll see this picture, and that is sort of their noisy active media center where they have computers and students are encouraged to work together in groups and talk and just brainstorm. And there's a lot of activity. There's a hub of activity going on. On the right is their more traditional media center space. It's actually up a floor, much quieter. It's separated by glass. Students are reading books and working independently. So they wanted to provide opportunity for both types of activities to occur within the building. They also, if you've ever been in there, there's furniture everywhere in the building, especially out in the corridors, and that was designed to allow students to work outside of the classroom environment and get together and meet in groups and start working on presentations, because the idea is that learning does happen everywhere, so it doesn't just happen when you're sitting in your desk, but it occurs informally, and we wanted to create opportunities for that to occur. Technology is everywhere. There's a bunch of lab spaces throughout the building so that students, when they're between classes, can access computers and technology at any time.
So, there's also several of the examples that you saw on the list of previous prototype uses that we've done. In some cases, those have been organized into academies, not dissimilar from what you were earlier describing, and that they're set up based around a specific specialized curriculum. So we've got some examples of how some of those have been organized. So if we go to the next slide, Sarasota County Technical Institute, there's a whole medical surgical technology lab and academy. It's a technical high school, yes.
Yep.
How old is it?
It's 3 years old.
Yeah.
It's actually been finished in
Actually
phases,
about- yeah,
so.
it's actually the first phase of that was under 1,000, but they've got phases to expand it further as they go on. This is, the health sciences lab that's a part of that academy. And again, just giving you some ideas again, especially knowing that you're looking at what's happening in Lake Nona and Medical City and some of the kinds of
With this
programs that
school,
could be.
is this strictly a technical school? Does it have an auditorium? Does it have a gym, or just a technical school?
It does have a gym, it does have some of the traditional components, but it is a technical high school out and out. So, again, you've got other opportunities, including robotics labs, culinary arts, business technology labs, computer drafting labs, all components that have been incorporated into this prototype and the various uses and various degrees, depending upon what your curriculum needs are. Early childhood centers, we've included those in some of our projects for other districts who wanted to have things like the voluntary pre-K program that you all mentioned. So again, another component that's very easily incorporated into the design.
And then one of the other things that was mentioned at the board workshop 2 weeks ago was sort of the future build out on this site, perhaps a future middle school on site. We've done a joint use cafeteria actually for a middle school and high school campus in
Where's
Marion
that?
County. Westport?
Marion County?
Marion County.
County.
Mhm. Yep. So there's an operable partition in that space. You can separate the middle school and high school students, or it can operate as one open facility.
So the next thing that we brought to share with you are some site plans. And these are by no means intended to be final renditions of site plans. They are simply to kind of illustrate what's possible. And certainly...
And what they do illustrate is what happens when you create site plans and haven't talked to the
There
client
you
ahead
go.
of time.
There you go. So what we've done here is on the site, we've laid out...
Vision.
Yes. We've laid out the high school campus, which you see in these sort of darker red colored buildings that are represented. And then we've projected in the future middle school based off of West Side or one of your middle school prototypes. And we're showing this building, this academic building, as possibly future. So what this represents would be a layout or a school that is consistent with Liberty in terms of its size and its capacity. You could build this now, you could build it later, and that if you were to build that as a 3-story building, it would take you all the way up to 3,500 students. You could build it, you got some options, you could build it at one as a 2-story and stop at the 3,000 level. I mean, there's options with respect to that. And we've also shown a shared kitchen here, and we've moved the kitchen into a location so that when the middle school is added, the multi-purpose dining space for that's right there on the other side, so you can serve out of both and get the benefit of sharing that centralized component. For graphic purposes, the cafeteria that we're representing here was sized to the 3,500 student level, just to give you an idea of what that would look like. And again, you can see that each campus, you've got their full accoutrement of parking and athletic spaces. One of the things that's very important about these is designing them so they have good public access to after-hours events. So having that direct access into the auditorium or the cafeteria or the gymnasium so that you don't have to go into the whole campus in order to go to those events is important. You can see that's very easily
It's
achievable.
right next to the football field too, that's good.
And the parking is right here, so you can park and direct access to the. So again, shared bus loop. So again, this is just to kind of show you a possibility. One of the things that we've learned, again, we've talked about 21st century education, learning happens everywhere. One of the things we've learned is that these courtyards, certainly as the schools get bigger, they can have a tendency to get to be these big, massive spaces. Well, you can implement some strategies in those courtyards that will not only enhance the 21st century educational aspect, but also more humanize those spaces and make them a little bit nicer places to be. So incorporating things like maybe an environmental bog or a swale element that can be incorporated into the science curriculum is an
To raise
option.
mosquitoes in the summertime.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Or seating areas where classes can be held outdoors, or even some demonstration elements, like in this suggestion, a demonstration photovoltaic panel. Those are just ideas of things that could be incorporated in that courtyard to actually make it a usable educational space. So we brought one other option just to show some other alternatives. Again, the layout of the buildings, a shared cafeteria, future middle school. In this case, we're showing 4 academic wings. Now, if you built all 3 of these as 3-story, as I said earlier, that would be 3,500 students. That would give you the capacity to, go beyond that if you added this building in the future. Or another alternative is maybe these are all 2-story buildings, and you could. So there's some mixing and matching of how tall or how vertical you want to go. Again, just intended to kind of show you what some of the options and possibilities that you can consider as you move forward into trying to decide how big and how many of what you want to do.
So the kind of wrap up of this, I think 2 things. Part of what we've tried to demonstrate today is the relevancy of this prototype that was most recently built at Liberty. And I think what we've tried to demonstrate is the fact that in the last 5 or 6 years, we've had a lot of exposure to the 21st century learning concepts. And with those 2, feel very strongly that we can take this prototype and deliver for you and certainly answer a lot of the concerns and questions that were raised in the last workshop. But I think this team is ready to go. We're ready to answer any further questions you have, but certainly appreciate this opportunity to have this discussion with you today.
Great. I'll start by saying thank you because you guys obviously listened well. You put together a presentation that really hits right on the head a number of the points and concerns that were shared with you. So I'm excited to see what you guys did in listening to what our vision was and where we need to go with that, and then working as a board to continue to refine that to give clear direction to everybody involved. So, board, we'll go. I know you were wanting to say something.
Well, I've got a question really for John and Clyde. We saw this presentation. According to what they're showing us and according to what you said last time, if we go with this direction with a prototype, we're going to save time and money. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm good. Thanks. If I can save time and money, that works for me.
This is really exciting. I do get that feeling of deja vu all over again. And I'll go from 40 years ago when I was in 7th, 8th grade at Beaumont Middle School, probably 4-year time, and we built these really cool 21st century pods that had no walls in them or anything else. And we took 4 teachers and stuck them in this big room to teach the same way they had always taught. In a classroom with 6 rows of 5 or whatever it is. So I guess I really think this is really cool, but it's only cool if Melva and Michael, y'all know how to use it. It doesn't, if we're gonna do all this really neat stuff and then line up 6 rows of 5 chairs, there's no need to do it. So that's I really like it. I think y'all listened, I think you heard what we tried to articulate.
I agree, and interestingly, when I was talking to Michelle, I used the Beaumont pod design as well as an example because I happen to enjoy that learning experience.
The old St. Cloud Middle School was like
And I
that.
taught in that experience at Beaumont.
By the time when you were teaching there, had they already figured out how to put bookshelves up and make
Yes, they
walls so it
did.
looked
Yes,
just
they
like
did.
a classroom?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
So that's what I would hate to see us go down this path of something that's really, I think, cutting edge and would really provide. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going, God, I wish I was in school and stuff like this. But if we teach the same way we've taught forever, I don't think it's.
And I think that truly is a topic of conversation. Belinda and Michael and I spent some time talking about this in regards to curriculum and how important it is to have those academies, to have those experiences. But what's really wonderful is to have the glass and to have those walls that are movable. Because there are times that you want everyone together, but there are times that you want to split them up. I noticed that you built Oak Ridge. I was over there, and I was at one of those lab centers where where in the middle are all of these kids talking and working in technology. However, in this room over here was a English language arts classroom. Right over here was a science classroom. Over here was a math classroom. And the opportunity for those teachers to team and have conversations and collaborate as to what they're doing across the board. So that's the direction in which we must go.
And that's the way we all work.
Mhm.
We all work in groups. We get up from our
Right.
offices and go into conference rooms and sit down together and then go back and work on what we talked about. And that's what this is, or that's what I see.
And I would add to that, what we've seen in our experience of doing these 21st century schools is that a lot of times there's a tendency in the discussion of that to want to kind of jettison traditional classroom educational spaces. And what we've seen is actually the successful 21st century educational models that we've seen allow for both to happen.
Right.
Because that traditional model still has a place. It still has a
There are times
place.
you're gonna let
So you can't jettison it all together. You've just got to have the flexibility that you can add the other things to it.
Couple quick comments and maybe a question for some of the administrators that are here and Dr. Akes as well. From where I sit, Mr. Thacker, I think you hit it right on the head, is that as we go forward, first of all, everything that you guys presented is exactly what I envisioned. It's exactly what I want to see happening. It's exactly what I want the next school in this county to look like. In addition to that, with the delivery of education, I want the adaptation to take place in the professionals that are in the classroom. That this may not be the right school for some of our staff because they may enjoy teaching the way they've been teaching and it's effective for them. And as you pointed out, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. This is just different. What I would envision is that we go in a direction with a campus like this, and then I'm going to come to the professionals in a moment, and we say, this is what we're looking for in a teacher for this type of a campus. This is a type of modality that we want to use to deliver this type of curriculum and this type of programming. And we want to invite you guys, the ones that are going to be outside of the box thinkers, innovators, so on and so forth, to come and be a part of what this campus is going to mean. Because I agree.
People who can live with chaos versus total order.
Yeah, if we build it and we try to modify the approach to fit, it's just not going to work. It all needs to be in concert with one another. So let me kind of go then to some questions. I know you gentlemen took the time to be here. Dr. Akes, you as well. You oversee this area for us. With what Mr. Wheeler had asked you earlier, to your list that you have, Mr. Studley, what are some of your initial thoughts and reactions on what you guys are seeing as principals that have lived and breathed this every single day and still are? And then Dr. Akes, your opinions as well. Go for it.
Well, I think the adaptability, flexibility is the key. I mean, having the opportunities, and particularly for the career and technical programs, those knowing ahead of time what's going in there, but also having the flexibility that walls need to move, working spaces, equipment can be brought in. Having that flexibility, and also understanding that the traditional style is still applicable and teaching styles are different. So accommodating that, I think, is key, and also the technology and the furniture, having the space available where you can bring collaborative types of structures. We just opened a new 20 classroom building, and it's a traditional prototype, I mean, square classrooms, but we've been able to bring in a lot of different kinds of furniture, different multi-tiered seating with collaborative shapes, the trapezoid shapes, and so within those traditional structures and bringing in laptop carts where we're having different structures within, we don't have a traditional computer lab, but we have computer stations based on mobile carts. So I think that's been the key for this traditional classroom and making it a 21st century style classroom. And going back to our 2004 design, Harmony High School, in that middle, we call the fishbowl. It was designed as a collaborative type structure, and some use it that way, but for the most part it is a regular classroom with glass sliding walls. So I don't think it's really lived up to what it should have been, so we kind of fall back to that space that we need to use as a traditional classroom. But we also have the career and technical rooms that are designed for those kinds of things, so we have that flexibility, so it works for us. But had I designed it, we probably would have limited some of the traditional classroom open spaces in lieu of more career technical types of space. And I think they asked for our input about years ago, I think even before the Liberty design, we gave it, and I think you can see some of those things at play with the new prototype.
Great, thanks, buddy. Yes, sir.
Kelly Myers is an assistant principal at Celebration High School, and she said the same thing you just said, buddy, is that the glass classroom, so to speak, they found that, she says that it's very distracting. Teachers make it work, but it's not really what they think it should be and what it was planned to be. So she confirmed what you just said.
It did get morphed once we built Liberty. You didn't have that. So that did change
Okay, got it.
as part of best practices, listening to what was working, what wasn't. So when Liberty was constructed, it has more of the traditional wings in it with the classrooms, but it does not have the fishbowl.
Okay, good.
And I think some of that too lends to the paradigm shift. I mean, you know, here you have a traditional model, a traditional box with the fishbowl that we're referencing. That doesn't fit necessarily, and you're trying to put your toe in the water as opposed to going with an entire campus that's buying into this entire concept. So it may not have worked to the extent that it's being utilized at Harmony and modified then at Liberty. But the direction we're talking about now says that really the whole campus, with some exceptions, kind of encompasses all of this concept, and really the paradigm is completely shift, which is my point about the delivery of education and the type of educators that may reside and perform at this campus. Mr. Studley, what are your thoughts?
You know, Mr. Butler really did an excellent job of describing his campus. I really like the idea of the walls that could open and close and make the spaces bigger and smaller. You know, some of the things that I had written on my list were feedback I had gotten from teachers about things they would like to see in the hallways. Like at Liberty, there are no teacher restrooms in the hallways. They have to come to the front office to go to the restroom. So, you know, things like that, having restrooms in the hallways for teachers. You know, the size of coaches' offices, things like that. The gym facility being closer to the athletic fields. You know, in the last picture that you showed on the, I know it's just a prototype or an example or something like that, but you know, your
Having that
gym,
more back
your
here.
gym is here and all your athletic fields are here. If you swap these two, or maybe put that here and put the auditorium here, because if you're a shelter, you know, having the auditorium by the gym and by the administration building would be helpful. You know, just thinking of those types of
Or
things. Or the
should put the
cafeteria,
football
bring
field
the
with a parking
cafeteria
lot in.
by that area.
Right.
But-
Or, well, the other, John just pointed, or the other alternative is move the athletic fields down here
Right.
to where the gym is, so.
Yeah, because part of the intent of that design as well was to bring all the public spaces to the front and leave the classroom spaces in the back so that we can utilize these campuses more as a community hub as well. But I think those are good points, Rob.
I talked to Mr. Lisby also, as he got celebrated. I said, you know, if you had to do it over, what would you do differently? And the only thing that he really stressed was we need more gym space. He said the gym, just, you know, for a school our size, if we could have bigger gym, more gym space, that's what would work for us. So that was the only thing he said.
Dr. Akes, did you edit?
I think, you know, I would defer to the principals that are in the building as far as moving the students around, and some of the logistical things that they've described. I do think the bigger space that furniture can move around in, easily accessible, technical programs, you know, where we can move them in and out. Keep in mind, I think that what Mr. Steiger's brought up is a perfect example of a really good idea that was not able to put into fruition. We're not building this for 5 years, we're building it for 40 years. And I'd leave it to the architects to be able to match the facade and the surrounding community. I think that between myself and John and the architects and the teachers in the school center, we'd be able to bring the programs in there that would really set the school up for success. But we want to be able to have space that's movable, but we don't want it to be the classroom without walls that Mr. Thacker described. We want it to be a usable building that everybody's proud of.
Agreed.
If we, looking at this, you're talking about your 3,000, your 3,500, or all that, saying we want to max out at 3,000. I'm not saying that's how the board feels. Would there be any benefit to say, let's do all 3-story buildings and allow more parking, more green space, more, is that?
Sure. I mean,
Does
that
that
gives-
save any money? Is that?
It does. John can explain that.
It will save money, you're building less rows.
Sure.
You're building, the floor space isn't that expensive, you're building one less foundation, one less roof. You still have the facade on the outside you would on an additional building, but you are saving money by going higher to a certain extent. So 3-story in lieu of 2-story would work. I would also, some of the feedback I've gotten is the back doors of the building, classroom buildings not being able to be usable for class change because they empty out. And I want to talk to the architect of turning those at about 30-degree angles so we can use both front and back of the buildings to get students in and out during class changes, because I hear they really have a hard time with 2,500, 26 students in class changes in 5 to 7 minutes. And it's really tough because they're all trying to come out the same side of all the academic building. So we're gonna look at things like that too, rotating the buildings a little bit.
We have an example of that, Martin County High School, not Martin County, what's the name of it? Martin County. Jensen Beach High School.
Yeah.
We rotated the classroom buildings 90 degrees. And it basically it does that. It allows you to be able to access the building from both sides.
Okay.
Again, another design that was based off of this prototype, so.
Yeah.
So let me ask Mr. Wells, wrapping up today, I have my opinions that I'm glad to share. What is it that you want from the board when we finish today?
Direction as, you know, it isn't a workshop setting, but a direction that we'll use the prototype to move forward. And if so, we can go to contract tomorrow on it. And the plan, we can start working on it tomorrow.
Sure. So from where I sit, board, and obviously everyone will weigh in, I think that the experts have done an outstanding job of convincing us that the prototype works. It's going to save us money. It's going to save us time. It's going to address the concerns that I know you and I hit on quite a bit in the last workshop. And the adaptability of the prototype is there to accommodate whatever iteration of it that we're looking for to get to that wow factor that we all talked about last time. So my personal opinion is that we give direction to staff to move forward. That's where I'm at, and we'll kind of hear from where everyone else is at on that. Mr. Wheeler?
I agree. The only question I've got, it really is more of just a nuts and bolts question for the superintendent and the school board attorney, Mr. Brown. The question is this something we need to bring back for a vote? I mean, how are we going to handle this? Do we bring it back today? Do we bring it back in September? Because, you know, when I look at it, I can save time and money. Time is time. So at what point do we need to vote on this, or because
we don't vote on a contract at a workshop unless it's an action?
No, I understand that.
So yeah, we need.
So it's got to come back to a board.
Yeah.
Can we add what we need to the agenda this evening?
The contract will come back at a board meeting.
So we can get this at the next board meeting.
Yeah. So staff will go to work if that's the direction.
Yeah, but to your point, Mr. Weiser, I'm totally on board with this.
You could even have a special meeting, you know, 2 days' notice if you want.
Right. Yeah. So we give direction. If that's the way we go, we move forward with this. We bring it back as quickly as possible to move forward and vote on it and be done. Mr. Soto,
I'm good with that.
You're on board? Yeah. You're good.
Yes.
You're good.
I'm good. Just one thing that I know this was really focused on the interior of the building, and you kind of said the wow factor. But I really like us to consider, I know the rest of the board thinks, is that Valencia building that's not far away is a pretty nice looking structure. Is figuring out how we look nice like that.
I think if that's what we're building upon, which is that Lake Nona, I was asking Jay whether he ever visited. But I'll tell you, I'm very impressed with that space and how it, and just how it goes towards where we're trying to do here is the 21st century learning environment.
That's the really traditional model.
Yeah. Is that what we're going with right there?
That's a little cold.
Wait a
We have
minute,
dungeons
take it back.
for the kids, the back.
This is where we're headed.
Did you design that too, Tom?
I knew she was gonna say that.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'm very good. Let's go.
And I actually agree with Kelvin and Clarence on that. I think the Valencia structure, I was sitting here thinking as we were going through all these signs, or photos here of all the different buildings,
It's pretty neat.
you know, I don't think we need to match it, but we don't need to build a
No, but
replica.
it does kind of set a standard.
I like a
Yes.
tie.
Yeah,
A
a tie.
It sets the standard, that's correct.
As long as Valencia's okay with that.
Yeah. Since we're talking about a couple things, I mean, I like the bottom left, the high-tech designs, and the middle bottom as well, for what it's worth. I felt like they gave that wow factor, and there may be a way to marry
I don't
some
think
of
there's
those
anything
pieces
wrong
in.
with any of them.
Yeah.
I just talking about blending with the area.
Either way, I think almost
I think we
any.
heard earlier, this is the one we want to outdo because that's the competition up the road.
Yeah, and truthfully, that's not the one I like, so we're good there.
We will, we'll work with Mr. Chandler and Joe and everybody, and probably set up maybe a couple of visits. Certainly have you guys invited. I know I want to bring the curriculum folks, the media and technology folks, and go and look at some of these sites and just see, you know, how they're working, talk to people, just put our eyes on it as we move forward.
And
I'm going to be also setting up, to start with, monthly workshops with you on this project, because there's going to be a lot of things going on, and we want to keep you up to date on every item. We may have to go every other week, I don't know. We'll start out monthly. but we do appreciate your attention to this and help us get started. We're excited tonight, right? I hope the community gets behind us.
Right.
Good stuff.
Mr. Will?
So the intention, let me just make sure we're clear on this. I mean, we understand we're gonna save time and money, and that's great. But relative to the time perspective, August 17, we can be open with a partial, with something, you know, some kids can go and then we finish it off August 18, we can be open full board. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
If that's the direction we're given to do, we can make that happen. It would probably end up costing a little more money than waiting and opening it all at once, because of how you're gonna have to mix things together to get half of it open. But we can do that if that's the direction we're instructed to do.
We need student stations.
What was your intent, John?
Let me speak on that. We've discussed this at leadership. I've discussed it at length with Rhonda's group. She's looked at how we would phase the children in, the placement of them, as well as transportation. There is an added cost to doing it, and I will tell you, I hope I speak for the whole leadership staff, we would prefer to open it in 18 at one time with all 4 grade levels instead of phasing it in. I think there's benefit and cost that we can get the school ready to go and have it ready probably even before that date. That, you know, we would be ready to put children in.
Do we need, here's the, and I don't care, but do we need, I mean, we've been under the impression for the past year that we need students, we're a critical mass relative to needing student stations yesterday. So relative to that, by waiting that extra year, what does that do to our capacity issues at the other schools?
We have some charter school, high schools that are still coming in that will absorb some of that. We do have capacity that we can put additional portables in, which makes them flexible. That's why we use them. I just think, and I'm speaking, Melba, I'm speaking for leadership, that
We had a conversation about
we
this.
did, a lot of
And Michael, talk about the curriculum, because that's also critical here.
Yes, with the 3-year opening, once the facility is decided upon, then myself and Mr. Allen and Dr. Bresendine will have to work really hard for the next 2 years on the feeder pattern to really make sure that the students that are stepping into this campus are ready for those careers that we want to put in there. But to your point, Mr. Wheeler, this is going to take the pressure off of one area of student station. You're still going to have to be faced with the discussion of Neptune. You're still going to be faced with the discussion of a wing OHS. You're still going to be faced with the discussion of the wing at St. Cloud. So the purpose for waiting is very purposeful for when you want to open it up. Mr. Allen has middle schoolers that are ready to step into it, and Dr. Bresendine has elementary students that are ready to go to those feeder pattern middle schools. So you've still got other issues there that this would not relieve, even if we opened it up within the 17th school year. So those other issues have got to be dealt with anyway. And so I know there was a second discussion on what that may look like, but I think that when we looked at it, feasibility and cost and what Rhonda said for it for growth, we feel like that we can handle a 3-year opening.
I will say that we've looked beyond the 5-year plan. I mean, our impact fees, our collections are great enough that working with Todd's group and coming up with what the students, generation rates continuing to look like, we've got another high school in mind, okay? Whether it's on Neptune or out west, we don't know yet. Those are things we're working on. But I can tell you, they're right behind this one. So you're going to need student stations, Jay. Yes, absolutely. I just think the 1 year it will benefit us to open it is a 9-12. I think that gives us our best bang for everything that we're doing.
I think what would be helpful, Clyde, as well, I agree with you, by the way, is have Rhonda come in at one of our upcoming workshops and show the projections and how those numbers will get rolled in and dealt with throughout the various campuses and expansions that we already have in place and the growth that we're realizing.
Okay. Very good.
Couple quick comments, board, and Tom and Michelle and others. Key things for me, guys, just so you guys, we're talking about this, you kind of hear the conversation about creating the site so that accommodates both the high school and the middle school and their shared space is incredibly important to me. Using the shared cafeteria space between the two schools and adjusting the approach that we take with food service there, I think is something that we absolutely have to look at. There's no reason for us to build two cafeterias on the exact same campus. We can realize an incredible cost savings by going in that direction. The last slide that was up previously with the site plan, with putting the gymnasium, the auditorium, and all those spaces out towards the front of the campus so that the community is engaged in what's taking place, for me is incredibly important as well. By way of example, I know a lot of us were at Osceola High School last night. We obviously love the school, we love the campus, but at the same time, everything's in the rear. And so bringing all that to the front so that the community's engaged in what's happening is important to me. As far as growth and numbers are concerned, I don't think I have any appetite for anything over 3,000 students, just from that point of, and that's an ongoing conversation. Collaborative learning spaces, modified media center, all those things were important to me. Creating courtyard learning spaces as opposed to just open green space that's not utilized, I think is something that needs to be incorporated. And I'm just putting these out so that when we come back together, at least you know where kind of my head is at. Maybe we're on the same page, maybe we're not, but it'll give you guys some time to think about what I'm saying, to see if there's a counter argument or an agreement on that as well. I think it's going to be important that you guys have some of that direction from all of us as early as possible so that you're starting to think and design towards that extent. So
I think one of the
agree,
things-
disagree, other.
I tend to agree, Tim. I think the one thing that I would add is the possibility of just seeing those an extra story on those classrooms that allow us
I agree.
a little more space, whether it's parking or whether it's a bigger gymnasium, and or more athletic complexes area, whatever. That's all I would add. But I would agree.
The only thing I'd add to it also, and I agree with everything you both said, is, and this is down the road, Michael, Melvin, but as we get into next school year probably, how do we start taking some of our existing staff and start getting them used to this type of thing on people we know may want to be going here when it's built? So when they get there, they're not figuring out how to use it, they've already kind of started. So if you'll start kind of thinking about that, and I'm sure as we get through the year, we're going to ask
Good.
how you approach it.
Keep in mind, board, I mean, there's something that, when you talk about student stations, if you build a high school for 3,000 student stations, it's really not intended, it's intended to have about 2,800 students on it because a lot of the spaces aren't used all the time, like music, auditoriums, that's why if you do a 3,500 student station high school, it's really for like about 3,100 students because the spaces aren't all used all the time. Just want to make that clear, especially relative to the high schools and middle schools. Just keep that in mind.
Yes, sir. Good point.
Yeah, the
May
rule
I-
of thumb is 95%, whatever student
Used to be
stations.
92, it's whatever.
I'd like to ask a question in regards to VPK that wasn't discussed at this point. I didn't know if that was something you were interested in or not
We need
interested in.
VPK student stations. If there's a place.
I'm just asking because I saw it on
It
the
was
very
in
first
their
slide, but
initial
it's
thoughts, I
never,
just-
has not
Yeah.
been
That should
discussed.
just- in
Would
there
that
somewhere.
change the design or? No.
If there's a way to do it, where we can get more kids, I mean, I could tick off a lot of things for us. And the only reason, I brought it up, I mean, because one of the things that you stressed, and fairly, is that kids aren't ready for school when they come to school, and the only way we can get them ready is with VPK, and our problem isn't not having enough kids, we don't have spaces for them. And
I was
so-
just only asking because it was on there, but it had not been discussed.
Well,
Is
I'm
this
glad you
a-
brought it up.
Yes, and I'd like the idea of having VPK. Is this design you're showing us here? Is it somewhere with the middle school attached like that?
In previous
Sort of.
examples, in some cases, it's incorporated into one of the academic wings, so that, you want to have that adjacent typically to one of these drop-off zones. So in this particular plan, I mean, this is the plan, it could be in that building, or we've also done it where it's incorporated up in this area, closer to the administration, closer to the front door.
Wait a minute,
So-
was that your question? or
No,
was it-
I was
Your
saying-
question was a shared middle school.
The shared middle school area
Yes,
there.
and to that point,
Oh, okay.
we've done something very similar to this for an elementary middle in Orange County. We've done something like this, but the difference is we've actually built two. If you go back to the other plan, that plan's good. Westport Middle High School in thank you. Westport Middle High School in Marion County. The core basically came through the middle, and the high school was on one side, and the middle school was on the other side. and the cafeteria was on the end. And that's the picture that we showed of the joint use.
And it was a
dining.
shared cafeteria?
It was
and it works
one,
good
it was
and-
one kitchen. Yeah, basically this was one kitchen. They distributed to 2 serving areas from the kitchen in the back. And this whole area here, as Michelle showed, you can see the wall there. It separated it, so you had middle school students on one side, high school kids on the other. They weren't interacting.
How old is that school?
That one,
It's about 12 years old.
12,
Yeah.
15 years old, yeah.
but now the one we just did for
Is-
Orange is only,
Sunridge Middle and Elementary School.
So you're talking 25 to 3,000 on your high school. How many in the middle school?
15,
Maybe
15,
15.
12,
So
15.
you might have 4,500 kids. That's a lot of meals in the kitchen.
Mhm.
Yep,
We've got a kitchen design to handle that.
Yep.
we did it,
Um,
we did it at Westport, yeah.
We've done it, as Joe said, we've done it in previous examples. I know from talking with Mr. Welsh, you know, the high school-sized kitchen has more than, really the savings you're gonna get on the middle school is that the high school-sized kitchen has the capacity that it can serve both. So you don't need to build that middle school, and you don't have to really add.
Who's the cafeteria manager at, so the principal of middle school, or principal of high school?
Probably at the high school. That's where they started, doesn't it?
But, so yeah, I mean, it is absolutely capable of serving both sides. This one is conceptually set up a little different, where the kitchen is in between, and you actually have the high school dining room on this side and the middle school, so the kitchen
Yeah.
separates them, so never the two meet. That's just one way to do it.
I like this just looking at it. To say that I know that would be a successful design, you know.
I mean, that's,
But
you know.
by looking at
to-
it.
To Clyde's point, you know, as we go through the design, you may want to go look at some of the things that are here locally that you can see. And Sunridge Middle Elementary is real close. You can see how that kitchen functions and how that one kitchen is serving both. Granted, it's middle elementary, but it's
Where
close
is it?
by. It's on the west side of Orlando, out by,
It's out by 535.
Yeah.
Winter Garden area.
Yeah, it's just south of
I
Colonial,
know where
or
you're
50.
I know that area.
Thank you, guys.
Tim, it's a
Appreciate
privilege.
your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Clyde, John. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Great job, thank you.
Shingles Schultz, thank you. Mr. Butler, Mr. Studley, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah.
Thank you.
Was that Taylor Swift we had?
We got another
Football game.
Buddy, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Robert? Mr. Studley? Thanks.
I'm going to try and architects.
Just fine, thank you.
Educators understand some things that buildings can do.
Okay. Michelle, thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that, like, all
Curriculum
Right.
those kinds of things. So
No way. It's just easy to think about. I was gonna say, I've heard the name a whole bunch, so.
sometimes I think
Nice to officially meet you.
staff comes in, they don't know that the
Watch
building,
it, yes.
they don't know they don't know that the building has certain capabilities.
It's a good name nonetheless.
So
Yeah.
that might be something that would help.
Oh, sorry.
Great direction. Thank you. Thank you. Chandler, thank you. Thanks very much. Great job. Very exciting. We're looking, it's been a while since we built.